I'm here with Barouk Almaw Gari, who is a friend I've gotten to know on Facebook on our correspondences about mimetic theory, and Rene Girard. He joins us from Ethiopia, where he continues as an entrepreneur, a developer of different uh, works in the marketplace. We can get into that a little bit, but I think he has a unique perspective because as someone who is a student of mimetic theory and applying it in world affairs, but from an Ethiopian perspective, it gives us insight into things that are going on in Ethiopia that can shed light for the rest of the world and how we can, navigate these times. So thanks for joining me, Baruch.
Thanks for having me, David.
And I wanted to kind of just kick off where we were going with that, which is, first of all, let's kind of lay the foundations for those of us who are fans of Rene Girard. How did you get into studying mimetic theory?
Um, this is back in college. I had a friend who was studying theology, and I grew up in a very kind of Baptist, kind of African Baptist church, and I basically had a lot of doubts and a lot of questions about religion, and a friend of mine just told me about Rene and told me a couple of his ideas, and I was very intrigued, and I checked him out, and I saw that YouTube series with the Canadian Broadcasting, I think, with I forgot his name, but it was a 5-hour series on YouTube, and it kind of opened the door for me, and I bought a bunch of his books, and I read him, and it was kind of like a revelation and kind of like an eye opener for me, uh, and the way I kind of understood politics and human relations and society and religion, and a lot of that kind of shifted. So yeah, that's how I got introduced to Rene Girard.
And you're a Christian. You're living in Ethiopia, and tell us a little bit about what you do as an entrepreneur.
Okay. Well, I came back 2 years ago, and I've just been kind of going, just looking around the entrepreneurial space, and I'm the CEO of this gaming company called B&K Entertainment. We're kind of specializing in fintech and in gaming solutions for Ethiopia. We're working on an application right now. That is basically like a fintech solution for Ethiopians trying to connect their bank accounts um, and be like able to pay easily through the internet.
Okay. And so video games, or is that like games on the phone?
Sorry, you cut up there.
You do video games for the like cell phone?
Yeah, website and application games that we're working on right now. But yeah, I've
Now
been I've been
I've got an idea I gotta throw at you.
all right.
I want to figure out how to make a video game that can show the scapegoat mechanism by letting you perform the role of the scapegoat throughout history. How's that sound?
Perform the role of the scapegoat.
Or try to find a
Interesting.
way to deflect a mob. Is there a way we can create a game where you have to like figure out how to survive a mob?
I think it would be more understood right now if you had a game similar to that, because of all the cancel culture problem that's happening all over the world. I think people would really enjoy a game like that. I think it would open a lot of minds, honestly.
Yeah, I could just see like you get thrown into different epochs of history, different cultures, different religions, different moments in history, and you are the scapegoat, and you have to figure out how to like you can't use violence, but you got to find a way to not be scapegoated and killed.
I like that. We can figure that out with the team. Get back to you.
Hey, look, if we can figure it out in video games, we can figure it out in real life, right?
Yeah, true.
They say math can save us, but perhaps video game programming code can save us too, right?
I think that will be the one that will just help us.
We need a Super Mario Bros. For mimetic theory, or a
For
Flappy Bird
sure.
for
I like
today's kids, right?
Whatever helps us wake up.
Well, that's something that everybody's talking about right now in America is woke. They're all awakened. I don't know what they're awakened to, but they're awakened. And, you and I understand mimetic theory, so that gives us a kind of unique angle on looking at these different victim movements of identity, right? And I saw you posted a quote from Thomas Sowell that I wanted to quote. It says that this is Thomas Sowell: "The reason so many people misunderstand so many issues is not that these issues are so complex, but that people do not want a factual or analytical explanation that leaves them emotionally unsatisfied. They want villains to hate and heroes to cheer, and they don't want explanations that do not give them that."
Very true. Very true. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it everywhere. You're seeing it in the United States now more prevalently, but you're seeing it in Ethiopia too. People don't want to reason when they're in a crowd. They want they just easy targets and shortcuts. But it just doesn't work like that.
So let's go through a few questions about Ethiopian politics. Ethiopia is a federal system that's divided by ethnic identity, right?
Yes. So it's so the country's divided into 9 states currently that are all ethnic tribes, basically. So the 9 states are ethnic tribes, and you have to make a majority in parliament to basically run the country. So it's just a bunch of minorities that need a majority to run the country. But yeah, it's divided along ethnic lines, and that has created a lot of issues in the country, a lot of issues.
And these ethnic identity groups, are these artificially constructed, or are they deep-seated, long identities that can be traced in history, thousands of years? Or
Yes, they're ancient tribes. You can kind of consider every state as a country, and that country has its own history. Um, like I said, Ethiopia shouldn't exist, on paper, in theory, because it's just so many different tribes are, in a country. And, there's this mantra that we were kind of told when we were kids of diversity is our strength. But we're seeing day by day that we really have to be, these moral people, to really live in a society like that. But if we're not moral, if we are, choosing scapegoating and rivalry and just escalating rivalry, then Ethiopia can't work. So we have to choose mercy over sacrifice.
that's interesting. And so do you is Ethiopia's federal system analogous to contemporary America, or say the older form of America, like in the earlier form of the republic?
Can you repeat that?
Is Ethiopia's federal system, is that similar to um, the earliest stage of the United States, or more of where we are now? Meaning, in the earliest stages, they were considered to be a collection of states that could secede at any time. Today, that's not an option. All the countries of America have been united under a national government. There's states in name only. They're
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
how is it in Ethiopia? Is it closer to centralization like we have in America now, or more like the older form of America where sovereign states can secede whenever they want?
I guess we're at that point where we need to have a civil war. I don't know, before we can kind of consolidate all these different tribes um, and have one country, basically. But yeah, right now, I would say Ethiopia resembles more the old America before before the Civil War, and the new frontier, and you have all these new states kind of forming all over the place, and there's no centralized government, and it's kind of like a little loose and crazy. But Ethiopia is kind of begging for centralizations, begging for an adult to kind of get us away from these tribal mindsets and kind of bring us all together as moral people, or it will not work.
And so you have these various ethnic identity groups. So there is everything in Ethiopia is mediated by identity politics, correct?
I wouldn't say everything. I think there's it's like the superior culture right now is more federalism, more ethnic identity, but there's also a counterculture for sure that is kind of against this kind of division. And so it's a battle. It's a battle that you're seeing kind of occurring every day, because the current prime minister is against this ethnic kind of tribal politics, and he wants a more centralized, unified country. So it's a battle.
So do you think peace can happen through centralization of the country or through decentralization of the country, in your opinion?
It's a very good question, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit. But the way that it is now, I think this ethnic politics, especially with the ethnic federalism as the foundation, would just be too tempting, for these activists and politicians to kind of play tit for tat games. And it just reminds me of my school commutes in the morning with my dad driving, and I'd be sitting in the back, and I would be fighting with my sister because I was in her airspace, or I just touched her elbow, and there'll just be chaos in the back of the car. So
yeah.
there's and I think we got to be adults and see that what's kind of hurting the country is these divisions, and they're divisions made by the government. The government kind of ratified this, put it in the constitution, and divided the country up, butchered it up. And you can kind of reverse anything that the government did, basically. So I would hope that the country moves more in a unitary direction, because the way it is right now, it just seems like people are just going to be overwhelmed by emotion and feeling, and there'd just be a lot of chaos that we can't control, we can't handle yet. We're not mature enough, I believe, in my opinion, to kind of have this kind of utopian, kind of European, kind of like let's all live together, kumbaya kind of situation with all these different tribes. It's not colorism, it's not all these other things. It's just our tribes. We're stuck in tribal mindsets, and we can't progress if we're still there and if our politics is still there. So that's the major thing, that we need to work on, is kind of waking the individual up and having them kind of focus on other things,
So to be woke in Ethiopia is to discover personhood and individual rights, right? And
absolutely.
is there a libertarian or limited government, private property consciousness developing in Ethiopia?
I think Abiy is bringing that to the fray for the first time.
So Abiy, in some sense, so in this context, it seems as if in order to bring in that liberty mindset, it has to come through centralization, not through trenching down into ethnic decentralization, right?
Interesting. I mean, that's my opinion. That's my opinion. It's just what all these activists want is more federalism. They want it's a very complex, kind of difficult situation happening. There's no easy answers, but
it's interesting to me too. It's interesting to me when I think about this, because as someone who looks at the narrative of history from the Christian awareness of the victim, right? Ethiopia has had Christianity for a long time.
Yeah.
And why hasn't it produced a more robust protect, or maybe it has, you can shed, why hasn't it produced more of that robust protection for the human individual against the tribe, against the collective, against the crowd? Since it's had Christianity in its tradition for such a long time, um, I'm thinking about uh,
Um,
I'm thinking about America and how America's experience with Christianity, having inherited it, allowed folks to think about protecting the individual against runaway mobs, against tyrants that could destroy their property at a whim, against tyrants that could have a monopoly on firepower, against destruction of people's ability to think for themselves or have their own religion, or to assemble. All these different things come from the Christian tradition's protection of the individual against the crowd. But
mm,
Ethiopia has had Christianity too. How come it didn't create the same outcome?
Very, very good question, David. And that's obviously one of the first things that came to my mind when I read Girard is, I have a, you know, case study right here. I grew up in it. And Ethiopia has a very long history. We were the one of the first countries to accept Christianity, a state religion, as a state religion, before the Roman Empire. All right. So it goes very, 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 it goes way back. But and I do think we see the effects of Christianity in the way that it kind of just lets these these ancient Ethiopians kind of tap into some truth, and they understand nature and God and people to a certain extent, but they're still people. They're still there's not really one direction in a way uh, for that revelation to kind of occur and kind of take place, but they have encountered that, and you can see that in all these like things that separate us from these other African countries, like our writing system. We have this amazing writing system that we've kind of invented. We have incredible art and culture and this stable nation, basically, that kind of lasted for thousands of years, and that was very Christian. It was a very Christian nation that and had people kind of um, you know living under that mandate in a way. And I understand that it didn't kind of evolve the way it did in Europe, but I don't think it's an experiment that we can kind of reenact. In a way, what happened in Europe was just so many different things. But Ethiopians were the first country in the League of Nations. Like in Africa, like there are no other countries in Africa that were in the League of Nations. We had very good relations with Europe in the Middle Ages. We were kind of this respectable kind of, if you've heard of Prester John, and all these characters back in the day of finding like this, this ancient, or this like this paradise Christian kingdom, this kind of fables that were being told back in the Middle Ages in Europe. They were talking about Ethiopia, and it had strong relations with the outer world, and it was also you could see in a way aspects of Christianity kind of simmering in and kind of affecting the culture, um, but it did not, in a way, transform the way it did in Europe. And that could be through so many different anthropological reasons that we can kind
Yeah,
of
I
maybe
think
study. But
I'm going to throw out one factor. Maybe you can tell me about this. Is um, did the Ethiopian different tribes, did they have access to the biblical text in their tongue where they could read it at home, or was that?
very good question. I do agree that one of the bigger catalysts for a lot of the things that happened in Europe was the Gutenberg Bible, right? People started to read their Bibles and kind of shifted them from this kind of archaic mindset, and people started to understand what the word said. I don't think that happened in Ethiopia.
Okay. So was it enclosed within the church, right? The text?
It was enclosed within the church, absolutely. And even the way, even the way it is right now, it's sort of like this archaic Catholic Church. The sermons are in this old dead language called Giz, which is very similar to what the Catholics have with Latin, right? Where people don't understand what the sermons are about, but people still go, and they're still very spiritual, and they stand and they kind of do their thing, but they don't understand what the sermon is about because it's in this dead language.
And how long has it been since the Ethiopian people largely lost their ability to understand this ancient language? How long has that been? Has that been 50 years, 100 years?
Oh,
how long is that?
Longer than that. Much longer than that.
How long? Hundreds of years?
I would say maybe 400 years, maybe 300 years, 400 years.
I think that could be the issue there.
The people don't. Yeah, for sure, absolutely. That's one of the main issues is people don't understand the word for themselves, and they're kind of being fed by priests and fathers of the church about what the faith is instead of understanding for themselves.
I have a lot of Catholic friends, so I'm not making a knock on the Catholic Church, but I think that's one area where Protestants made an impact, which was getting the Bible text written in the tongue of the people, whatever people was engaging with it, and then allowing them to have access to that text at home where they can read it. Because when you keep it enclosed within a tongue that the masses don't understand, and you keep it within the confines of the institutional church, I think it retards the ability of the Bible to deconstruct crowd mentality within a culture. Does that make sense?
It does. Sorry, I'm moving a little bit.
No problem.
But funny enough, there was a Reformation in Ethiopia before there was a Reformation in Europe.
Interesting.
You had these church fathers who wanted to go in a different direction with the faith. And I apologize, I'm trying to plug in my charger. It was before the Europeans, and you could see that there was this push. It's only a matter of time until Christians anywhere kind of understand what the gospel is about and what Jesus is about, and see that it's not about this religious nonsense. It's not about these rituals and these cultural kind of these costumes. It's more than that. And they were seen as heretics, and they were killed, all of them. So it's just Christianity in Ethiopia has come in a different direction.
So the Reformation in Ethiopia did not hold. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it did not take.
And when was this? What era was this? What century?
I would say the 15th century, maybe the 15th century, maybe the 16th century.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the dates. I will get back to you on that. But
at the time of that Reformation, was one of the issues the ability to get the text available for the native tongue of the masses, or was that not an issue debated? Do you know?
I'm not quite sure about all the details, but as far as I understand, it was a doctrinal kind of difference. Kind of like Martin Luther kind of posting up the I forgot what it was called, but
it was 95 Theses. Yeah.
And so it was a doctrinal kind of disagreement that these like reformers kind of noticed, and they kind of spoke out, and like you said, it didn't pan out.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question, because before we have a proper understanding of the impact of Christianity in shaping the conversations and the cultures that we have here in 2020 AD, we have to know how the gospel actually affects a society, right? One of the
Yeah.
first things that I think a lot of missionaries say when they present the gospel story to an indigenous culture that has never heard the gospel, one of the first things they do is that they abandon their sacrificial rituals.
True.
But I think in order for the gospel to have a deep effect to the point where it starts to create radical protections for the individual against the crowd, like presumption of innocence, habeas corpus, these are doctrines of the West that have protected people in ineffective ways many times, but very true that they are different, because you protect the individual from a crowd, right? Um, uh, I think that those are things that, in order for you to have that kind of protection for the individual against the collective, you have to have access to the biblical text in your native tongue for a period of time, so that the people's consciousness can be saturated by the aesthetic and the ethic of Christ crucified, and how that shapes the way you should treat your neighbor. Does that make sense? I think we lost you. I can't hear you. Let me. Oh,
Oh,
oh, we had.
how about now?
Yeah, good. I think somehow you got muted there. Okay, go ahead.
Oh,
Did you hear what I was saying about the text?
I did, I
Yeah,
did. Yeah, like I was saying, Ethiopia, I guess, didn't go through those stages,
interesting.
and the Christians in the country did not have the text on them. It was a very illiterate population, and they didn't learn to read and write. And what the priest said was what God said, and so people didn't venture too far away from the crowd in that context. But Christianity has had a spike in the country, like in other African countries, with European missionaries that kind of circumvented the Orthodox Church, and ministered to these southern states that kind of picked up Christianity, and picked up the Bible, and the southern states in the country weren't Christian. They had very traditional religions, and like over maybe 20 years, you have such a spike in the Pentecostal population in the country. Is the word even Pentecostal in the country is almost like a pejorative with the majority Orthodox, because they don't like the Pentecostals, and you wouldn't think that they would be however much they are today, with like almost 18% of the population, which is amazing, this incredible surge. And so people understand, people are growing, and people have the Bible now, people are reading their Bibles, but we still have this legacy, we still have this culture from thousands of years, and we can still tap into it to say that we're a Christian nation, and that we can understand that we should really kind of have Jesus' story kind of ferment, and just for us to model Jesus Christ, and kind of evolve from these tribal politics and these crowd mindsets. I think it's about time for Ethiopia to do that, because we've had such a head start from other countries in the world, honestly. So yeah, I think that's what we should be doing. We should model Jesus for the first time. We should really understand what Jesus was trying to do. Hello?
Yeah, I think we had a little cutout there. You said what Jesus was trying to do, and what else?
Yeah, well, what Jesus was trying to do in this world, and how he was trying to wake us up from all these trivial tribal conflicts and rivalry, and not just tribal, of course. Obviously, as we understand, it's way more personal than that, right? It's much deeper, and if we can understand that about Jesus, I think then Ethiopia would be okay. But it's about time that we understood that that revelation, the Jesus revelation, and evolve, spiritually and socially.
Now, you mentioned that Ethiopia has had a lot of great developments compared to some other countries in the region. What about Libya? We hear a lot in America that Gaddafi had Libya very advanced. Women were getting education at colleges. There was a large gold holding in the country. There was the proliferation of development in the community before the Western countries sacked Libya, overthrew Gaddafi, and installed whatever they've done there. How does Libya compare? I mean, how does Ethiopia compare with what we were hearing about Libya being a kind of model nation in the region in Northern Africa?
Um, so how does Ethiopia compare to Libya?
Yeah, well, just like how did Libya? Because I get the point I think we're making was that Ethiopia's Christian heritage had a role in giving Ethiopia some of its advantages. But then you have the example of Gaddafi with Libya. I'm just trying to think of that as a counterexample, perhaps, that a country could have advancements and so forth, but maybe not share. Was it a Christian heritage that gave Gaddafi that advantage for Libya? I don't know.
I didn't catch most of that, but I'll try to answer. Yeah, Ethiopia and Libya, I guess, could be compared if you wanted to see what unfettered tribal politics can kind of where that would lead you. Although Gaddafi was basically the one person that was kind of keeping everything together in the country. Here's the same thing with Abiy. If you just pull that pin, a lot of things would just come unraveling and creating a lot of, all the people that would be displaced, all the violence. There's all these very smart foreign policy analysts that are kind of ringing that doomsday clock and warning against all these very scary possibilities. But Libya's, I guess it is a different case than Ethiopia, but we could see similarities if you want to see how crazy politics can take you.
We have heard that since the Western governments overthrew Gaddafi, that slavery has returned to Libya. Has that institution, is that in Ethiopia at all, or is that completely gone in Ethiopia?
One of the requirements for Ethiopia before they joined the League of Nations was to abolish slavery, and that was in the 1940s. And we abolished slavery back then. But it's still a very archaic society in some parts, and you could see elements of that culture kind of existing still.
Do some of the ancestral religions that may still have a foothold in Ethiopia, do they allow or promote animal sacrifice or anything? Does that still continue today?
Not blatant. You could go to these archaic tribes, there's this tribe in the southern of Ethiopia called the Hamar tribe, who kind of reject civilization and kind of like live, like prehistoric kind of, people. if you follow their traditions and rituals, I'm sure you'll see a lot of sacrifice and stuff. But for the majority, Ethiopia is a Christian nation. It's a Christian and Muslim nation. There's 33% Muslim in the country. And these two cultures don't like these blatant archaic religions kind of peering their heads with the sacrifice and stuff. That could be, that wouldn't look good. And they have like a sixth sense about that. They don't like that. They don't like sacrifice, at least blatant sacrifice like that. It's
right. The older
Christians
form
don't
of
like.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, you and I know that government acts as a kind of modern form of sacrifice in the way it uses the power of the state to put people in cages of prison and so forth for unjust reasons. So that's a more modern, sophisticated, hidden form of
Yeah.
sacrifice that continues. But I thought it was
Yeah.
interesting in
I mean,
India. In India, there are some communities where they still do child sacrifice and witch burnings and stuff like that occasionally. And so I just didn't know if there was any of that pockets of that left in Ethiopia.
there might, it's not blatantly, right? There could be, because like I said, the country is 80% rural, you
Right.
know. So most people don't live in the cities. People live, out in the boonies, as Americans would say, like just out in the middle of nowhere, with old traditions and no contact with a lot of ideas. And so, you might see little pockets of sacrifice, but it's not prevalent. It's not obvious, and it would get shunned by majority of the people.
A lot of
In a way, I
folks.
guess that's,
Go ahead.
yeah. In a way, I think that's how we've evolved. We can see how Christianity has affected us by the way we kind of reject this obvious, magic rituals, sacrifice kind of stuff. You don't see that in Ethiopia.
Um, my friend Monica Paulus, who I've gotten to know, she's from Papua New Guinea, and they over there they're still engaged in witch burnings. If a child dies in a village, uh, usually it will be spurred on by like if can you hear me? Let's see. Baruch, do we have Baruch? Let's see if we hello. Okay. Let's see if we can get Baruch back on his. I think he's got his cell phone connection might have gone. Let's see here. Um, well, we're going to try to see if we can get Baruch to reconnect back in, and we'll continue the discussion about Ethiopia and mimetic theory. Very interesting stuff. A lot of interesting things to think about, factors to think about, um, as we see the influence of Christianity in different ways around the globe, how it impacts people based on obviously the human free will choice of how we're going to respond once we encounter the gospel. It's definitely not something that um, can be a quick fix. That someone encounters Christianity and therefore their culture is able to just be completely transformed into a Christian paradise. That obviously is not the way it works. It's not an ideology that promises an immediate fix like Marxism or fascism, but rather it's something that is a yeast that works itself out in a community like a loaf. So let me see if we can reconnect with Baruch and continue. And if not, we can pick up this conversation at another time. Let's see here. I think that's something that we need to think about in our culture is you know, the heritage of what Christianity has brought in being able to protect the individual from mindless crowd collective persecution. So we're going to see if we can reconnect, and if not, we'll pick this up another time because this is an interesting discussion, and I think it's important for us to learn from other countries, learn from other cultures. If we're going to have a conversation about justice in this country, if we're going to have a conversation about where rights come from and where oppression comes from, then we're going to have that conversation, and we're going to do it right. We're not going to have this artificial woke ideology hijack people's imaginations with a ideology rooted in a lack of understanding of anything about history, a lack of respect for the individual person. All right, looks like we have Barouk back. Do we have Barouk? There you are.
Hello.
We got you. Got you back in. Can you hear me clearly?
Yep.
Well, I want to just
Can you see
kind
me?
of.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you and I can see you. I think we were on to a good path there, and hopefully we can continue this. At another time when we can get a more stable connection, because you've got a lot of great
Yeah.
insights, and I want to continue to discuss the impact of Christianity in Africa.
Yeah.
I want to give you a quote by a bishop of the church, Cyprian, of Carthage, right? So he's an early Christian writer. He's a Berber,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you're familiar with him. But he has this quote here: "Consider the roads blocked up by robbers, the seas beset with pirates, war scattered all over the earth with the bloody horror of camps. The whole world is wet with mutual blood and murder, which in the case of an individual is admitted to be a crime, is called a virtue when it is committed wholesale. Impunity is claimed for the wicked deeds, not on the plea that they are guiltless, but because the cruelty is perpetrated on a grand scale." You know, it's a very, very powerful insight. That's 250 AD by Saint Cyprian.
I like that. I
And
want to check it out.
What's interesting to me, Barouk, is that we're told that when we want to stand for individual liberty, right? We're told by the fashionistas in the West that we are just doing, Western toxic, Western ethnocentrism when we want to protect individual rights. But here we have Saint Cyprian from Northern Africa in 250 AD. He didn't know about Bastiat or Thomas Jefferson or, Ayn Rand or Ron Paul. He didn't know anything about that, but he's encountering the gospel and making a very Christian insight, right? Which is that you have to be responsible for the violence that you're doing in a collective setting. And just because a society says it's okay to go to war doesn't mean you're not guiltless of the murder you're doing. And just because a society says you can, hurt someone in a mob doesn't mean it's okay. You're still guilty of the individual violence that you participate in,
Yeah, I agree. And that there needs to be, in a way, an individual awakening everywhere. The truth is not European. The truth is God. The truth is what Jesus did for us. And when He showed us that, when we're in a crowd, we don't know what we're doing. We're away from reason. We're not, in the light of God. We're not, we're not acting and behaving like Jesus. We're stuck in there. We don't know what we're doing, and that's one thing that happens in situations like this in Ethiopia is, you get in the crowd and you don't see your problems. You see your neighbor's problems, but you don't see your problems. You don't see how you're instigating, conflict, and how you're being stuck in, rivalry. You don't see that, but you just see the enemy. All you want to do is scapegoat, and you can't have that in a Christian nation, a nation that has been Christian, or is the nation that's been in the Bible. Like you have the eunuch with Philip. You have Queen of Sheba. You have a bunch of these characters from the Bible that are Ethiopian. And we've been involved, with this experiment, and it's just not right that we're still, stuck in groupthink, and we have not seen this revelation that God has brought to us.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how Christianity is at the root of all the debates that we're having in the world. The question about whether we're going to sacrifice our neighbor or show compassion, and forgiveness and mercy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up. You're breaking up.
Yeah, we can land the plane. I just want to ask a couple more questions, just kind of help folks who right now maybe they're in the West and they've got an education from a rich, decadent Marxist professor. They got their degree, and they think they know what it means to be awakened, which is to join a identity politics crusade. As someone in Ethiopia, what's your take on that? Looking across the pond.
Can you repeat that last part again?
Yeah, just looking across the pond, seeing this emerging political movement that's tried to use the banner Black Lives Matter to push for kind of revolutionary overthrow of things like private property, things like speech, things like assembly, things like, anything that has the basis in the protection of the individual person. There's a zeal to destroy all of that in the name of being awakened to the truth. As someone in Ethiopia, I just wanted to get your perspective on that, looking across the pond at America.
Yeah, I think we're all fighting the same fight. It's always the individual versus the crowd. And, we're trying to implement it here for the first time. And you're seeing America going back to where we are right now, where we don't want to be. So it's just not, the right direction for any country, right? You see, Black Lives Matter, you see all these different Marxist, groups and mindsets that are kind of taking hold all over the world. And it's a reversal. It's going back to the Old Testament, going back to crowd mindsets and mentalities, and kind of sacrificing the individual for the sake of the crowd. And what individualism and what Jesus brought is the truth, right? It's the truth. And the truth is most of the time covered up and scapegoated, when you're in a crowd. And so if you're seeking truth, this is the only fight that matters, right? You can't kind of turn your back on it. You have to always speak up, tell the truth, and also, treat people with love, just like Jesus did, not be bullies. But this is the only fight that matters, I think. Wherever you are, not just Americans, Europeans, could be Asians, it could be Arabs or whoever, this is a problem for humanity, and we have to recognize, these contagions, that kind of spread amongst the people and make sane people crazy and possessed. And you have to fight it. You have to stand up and push against that culture and that spirit.
Well, how do we
and I think
fight
that's
against it without becoming? Now, here's a tough one for you. I'm going to give you a hard question here. How do we fight against that spirit of the crowd without being drawn into mimetic rivalry with it, or becoming a pushover where you allow the crowd to just mow over you as a witch burning or something?
Yeah, I think this job it's a spiritual battle, right? In the end of the day, it's a spiritual battle, and it's not it's a battle of spirits. And we have to have our side kind of geared up and armored, and we have to know who we are and what the battle is, and be spiritually strengthened by the fact that it's God's battle, right? And you're just speaking up for the truth, and whatever happens is what God has willed, essentially. And so you have to engage everything through love, or you'll just be another bully in this this mosh pit, basically. So you have to deal with it with love. You have to love these people because they don't know what they're doing. And you have to, if you have to wake them up. That's the trick. That's the mission. And you have to do it with love, and and understand that this is a battle of principalities, and it's a spiritual battle, and it's the only, I think, fight that is worth it for us, to really stand up and not be afraid of what comes next, and with love and truth, and just tell the truth, stand up for people, and don't cower, don't be afraid of what the mob is going to say. I think that's a true test for Christians, and really get yourself right too with God. If you're not right, then you just be like those the sons of Sceva. Remember those people that were kind of trying to do what Paul and Silas were doing, and they kind of got beaten up by that the possessed guy. Remember?
Yeah.
You have to really be you gotta be ordained. Has to be right. You have to be right with God, and anything else will just fit, and anything that happens will be what God has willed. And so you don't have to be, you won't be afraid what happens. That's the way I see it.
And you, I think you probably, have a different perspective than a lot of people who went to college education here in America. They are told that every problem in Africa is caused by colonialism, right? Would you say that Ethiopia's biggest problem has been caused by colonialism?
No, we weren't colonized. We're the only country in Africa that wasn't colonized.
Right.
So,
I just wanted to let the so-called woke people understand history a little bit there.
Right. I mean, it's not a black and white thing. I mean, one thing that the mimetic theory kind of taught me is like this angle of history that I wasn't taught. And it's you become woke in a certain way. You see how countries develop, and what kind of ideals grow people, and how moral people grow faster than immoral ones. And the nation is only as strong as its unity and its founding ideals. If it's founded on bloodshed and murder and violence, it'll just be too chaotic, and it'll just it's only a matter of time until it kind of crumbles down into like the way, and back to the way it was before. So
Yeah.
If there was any colonialism, it would have been the Marxist mob that murdered Emperor Selassie, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Ethiopia, I say, kind of went downhill when they, there's this movie called Teza. It's an Ethiopian movie I really like. You should check it out. Maybe I'll send you like a link or something. But it's a very interesting story because it tells you about like this pre-Haile Selassie kind of era, and how like you had like these revolutionary youngsters kind of embodying this Marxist revolution theory in the 70s and the 60s. It's like this hip thing, and they embrace this revolution, and and then they see how it was after, right? How this Marxist junta basically terrorized the country for decades, and killed so many people, and just brutally, it was this crazy religion that was just going around the country just killing people who weren't adherents. And you see the before and after effects of how people think it's just cool and trendy, like, yeah, let's just get rid of these old people, and let's just create a new world after their death from their bones, and it doesn't turn out right. It never has. And Ethiopia knows that more than many countries.
Do you think that America is going to face that kind of Marxist overthrow that led to the bloody murder of Emperor Selassie and many people in Ethiopia? Or do you think we're not in that same direction?
I mean, it's the same direction. It's the same forces, right? All over the world, it's the same forces of evil kind of pushing itself against moral people, right? It's trying to denigrate society. It's trying to break it down from the source, from the family. And if you kind of turn a blind eye to it, if you turn around, then it's going to happen. There's no reason why not. And it can grow. It can grow as well. If you're not careful, if you're not actively fighting against it, then you have this thing that can kind of mutate and grow like a virus in the culture. That could just metastasize. It can just go everywhere. You got to be very wary of this, and I think Americans, I don't know, because of this super liberal kind of mindset about, not telling the truth. I don't know what it is, but Americans haven't been paying attention to this, and I think where America is right now is a testament to, how far America has kind of fallen in a way in that sense, because this wouldn't happen in a moral nation, right? In a nation that is upright and fears God. Like, you wouldn't just turn a blind eye. You wouldn't just ignore certain things or just be afraid and just locked up in your house. And so there is this push, I think, that is happening in America, and I think it's not for the best. If America is being kind of bullied and pushed around like that internally, I think the foreign policy situation around the world, I think it would start looking very shaky, and you'd start emboldening all these dictatorships and rivals like China to grow and influence more than it is right now, and it is influencing a lot. So yeah, I think America is not just America, Europe as well. You have to just start thinking common sense, right? Mm-hmm. Not get pushed around, not get obsessed with the mob and not fear the mob. And I think there's a lot of that, and I think there's a lot of materialism too. Americans love their stuff, and if that's getting in the in the crosshairs, then I don't know.
I'm thinking about what you just said there about foreign policy. I'm a critic of American foreign policy as a conservative Christian who believes in family. I think we've been nation building all over the world, and we need to stop it, right? And I think our addiction to overthrowing countries overseas has come back home to roost in America, because Jesus was the Prince of Peace. And when people go to the church to listen to the church be a prophetic witness against government and its abuse, and the church doesn't stand up against the abuse of our soldiers' lives and those around the world that we want to do nation building on, that eventually the church loses its moral credibility to bind a community together, and you get this false religion of the woke ideology coming about as a replacement. And so on one hand, I think, here's my question. On one hand, I think there's a lot of folks in the world who resent America because of our foreign policy and maybe our decadent Hollywood culture that we've exported around the world. And on the other hand, there are millions of people that you alluded to who look to America as a role model for liberty, even though they're not acting it sometimes. America still has huge advances for liberty, presumption of innocence, right to a fair trial, right to have publicly funded trial lawyer if you can't afford it, having respect for individual liberty. So I think my question is, having those two perspectives in balance, both America's abuse of foreign policy that has created resentment, and at the same time, America's good role model for many countries' perspectives as a bastion of freedom in some ways, what would the overall psychological impact be for America to fall into internal Marxist type chaos?
I think the Marxist cultural revolution happening in America is the enemy of America, and if that Marxist takeover happens, that America goes down, and then the world shifts basically in ways that I can't imagine. You have China strong arming African countries now. China is a very not volatile, but very unpredictable nation. It's a superpower. It has all these developments that have happened over the last how many years, decades, that have kind of positioned it as a rival for America. And so if America goes down, then China's influence increases around the world in unpredictable ways. But it's very dangerous. Right now, I think America, in intellectual spaces, in woke spaces, they're the school proctor, like the class proctor, right? The prefect. I don't know
Right.
if Americans have prefects, but they're this bratty prefect that people can kind of scold now. It's getting a little weaker, so you can kind of scold it and push it around, but it's still the prefect. But if someone sucker punch that prefect and that prefect goes down, then then it's just chaos. But it's kind of it's entertaining in certain circles to kind of make fun of America and not really see the effects that America's had on foreign policy in the world for the last in the last 100 years. But America's done quite a lot, in ways maybe that are not documented, because America is like this kind of basically scapegoated by the entire world for plethora of reasons. But we can't. I think a good and strong moral America is very good for the world, because it can just be this stopgap against all these other differing ideologies, including North Korea and China and Russia. And if America goes down, then a lot of you would see the world change in a lot of unpredictable ways. That's just how I see it.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's a interesting thing to think about, because I think a lot of people on the left are so bratty and so spoiled with decadent wealth that they don't understand that a lot of people around the world look to America's ideas as hope for where they can move their country. And if that role model vanquishes its own liberty, that would be a dark place for a lot of people who are looking to America as an inspiration, just like Hong Kong, the protesters singing the national anthem, because they admire the ideals of America being a society founded on rule of law rather than rule of ethnic priority or stuff like that, right? Even though it hasn't lived up to that perfectly, the respect for the individual person against that collective is what something is so attractive for many people around the world to look for, right? And if that goes out, psychologically, people are going to feel pretty despondent. Maybe is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and not just that. When we, this Christian, revelation that we're trying to teach, we can't teach that in China. China's very closed off. They're very adamantly going to pursue you with violence if you come in and try to preach the gospel to its people. So if China becomes the superpower, right, then it would be this kind of gated government that is just running the world, and you can't interact with it, you can't share your ideas. There's only one idea, the only idea that goes, which will be whatever the CCP says. The only place that you can still kind of push and fight is in America, right? America is still, so far, is still open for discussion. There's still conversations happening, and there's still elections, and you can still influence people. But if America goes, then that could mean, like a Hitler, atheist nation that has, no morals above their, what's the, the might makes great. Oh, is that the
might makes right?
Yeah. So might makes right, which would be, this kind of Nazi mindset that would be running the world.
Right.
You wouldn't have any way to kind of influence the Chinese Communist Party after they've taken over the world. There'll be no way. So you gotta, I think the only battleground right now is in the United States, and that's why people kind of tune into CNN all over the world, because it's such an interesting reality TV show, where people maybe know the truth, back in the back of the head, but it's just such an intriguing kind of, pick your team kind of situation where some people pick the BLM, some people pick, the conservatives, and it's just like a reality TV show. And all over the world, like everyone is watching what's happening in America. Everybody, CNN is all over the world. There's CNN International, BBC International, you have CGTN, the Chinese, controlled media, that's also spreading their propaganda around the world. And so America's
fighting, which is probably pretty identical to CNN, to be fair, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just exactly. It is exactly. I mean, you can compare them if you'd like, but CGTN knows that a weak America is good for them, so they would encourage. They had their press secretary kind of denouncing the American racism. Like the systemic racism in America. They had the press secretary for the CCP come out and say that.
Of course, what would the CCP see if Black Lives Matter overthrew a Chairman Mao statue in Beijing? How would they deal with that?
Ooh, you know what I'm saying? And we could always like look at the Cultural Revolution in China. You know what I'm saying? And how they would deal with situations like that, because they would understand that, these revolutions are dangerous and they could kind of spread and they could create kind of chaos. But America's over here kind of, giving lip service and kind of, being, like nice and I don't know, like just playing politics with it. When, when there's this cultural revolution that's kind of taking the legs off of, the American Republic and kind of creating disunity and all these kinds of problems that everybody's looking at, everybody's seeing all over the world.
Right. Do you, China has an impact, a big influence in Ethiopia. A lot of my, fellow Americans who are conservative or libertarian are critical of America's form of involvement in Africa, and they use China as a positive relative to America. Like, look at China; they don't go around and and do regime change. They just go in there and build stuff, and get a hold of the mining and get a hold of the resources, get a hold, build the trains, build the different infrastructure. Their form of diplomacy is a lot more effective than America. Would you agree with that? Having living in Ethiopia, knowing China's influence.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree, right? That China has different kind of means, and that's because they've studied them, the organizing so much problems for everybody, right? For all parties. So they're coming in it from a purely economic standpoint. They they lend these countries a lot of money, and in some cases the countries, I think it was Zambia, put their entire sectors, like their transportation sectors, on the line when they borrow money from China, and if they default, the Chinese government takes over that whole sector in the country, right? They take over entire sectors, like entire economic sectors in the country if the country defaults with their debts. So yeah, China's doing a different different angle. They're interacting with African countries purely from an economic standpoint. But just looking at history, I don't think the American this regime change foreign policy decisions were back in the day that they might have sounded like the best idea, right? And it's not always that you see that it just turning to hell in the country, because sometimes the American influence could be net positive, right? We can see South Korea, maybe we can even see Japan, where there's a lot of influence in the economic and governmental kind of structure. They can kind of give a little push in the back to kind of let people get up to track with the rest of the world sometimes. But yeah, the way China's doing it is not in any way more, let's say, they've just studied history. They've just understood that the way this way, or the way that Americans have done it before, the regime change is not the best way to do it now.
Right.
And so I wouldn't really give much to China. I mean, they're building all the infrastructure here in Ethiopia. They're building all the roads, building buildings. They've gifted the African Union headquarter building. They've gifted us for free. They've just built this really nice building in the capital that is designated for the African Union. So all the meetings, the African Union meetings, are held in Ethiopia. And so they've built they built a building for free, and they just gifted it to Ethiopia in the African Union. Although there were allegations that the computers that they gave to the African Union were secretly spying on the users, which is quite funny and classic of China. Obviously, there wouldn't be a free gift. There's always something behind the scenes. But China's not to be trusted to in the way that I believe you can trust America, or at least the America that was before. But the way America is right now is, I think they're flirting with a lot of dangerous ideologies that are against the country. They truly, I think they're the enemies of the country, and that's how China's seeing it, and the rest of the world is seeing it. Just Americans have to wake up and kind of take over their country again, and make sure stuff like that doesn't happen.
My theory is that if we abandon the big government intrusion into our lives in the form of nonviolent crimes, if we end the drug war, if we end the heavy taxation, regulations, and licensing in America, that it would free up a lot of prosperity and wealth for all, and dismantle a lot of generational broken family. It would stop that, because if you end the drug war, you eliminate the violent gangs that control a lot of inner cities. You eliminate the incentive to get into selling drugs. If you end these victimless crime laws and get rid of a lot of the heavy regulations and taxes and rigging of the market in America, I believe that those reforms would scratch the itch for justice that the people have better than cultural Marxism tries to, right? And so that's kind of my alternative, which I don't get into the left or right. I go for something different, as you know, using mimetic theory. Do you see that as a possible remedy that, you know, looking at America might help alleviate the growing appetite for justice, but direct it in a way that still preserves individual liberty?
I'm no expert in America for sure. You know, I was only there for 4 years. I really, really enjoyed my time in America. You know, I made a lot of good friends. I was in Ohio. You know, I was in a small town called Ashland, and you know, I had a really good time. You know, I had lots of friends that were really nice, really good-hearted people that I'm still close to. You know, I had friends fly to Ethiopia to see me last year. You know, and so I really respect America. I really enjoyed my time there. But you know, I'm no expert again. But the way I see it is, there needs to be a reform, a way for people to come back to Jesus, right? Personally, you know, I don't think it's always these laws that kind of, you know, keep people back. It's sometimes a spiritual thing, you know, where you know, maybe it's like, you know, the way the family is, the way the upbringing, the way the culture is, you know, and the way it is right now. I think Americans need to go back to God, right? People need to be upright, moral people, right? It doesn't matter if you're like, you know, economic situation, doesn't matter if you live in the hood or if you live, you know, in, you know, this upscale kind of situation. You have to be moral. If you're moral, then you make the right choices, right? And I think, yeah, there needs to be kind of a reckoning where people just wake up and remember how it is to be a good, upright, just, moral person that fears God first. And then I think a lot of things kind of fits into place. And then, you know, these moral people would not have all these regulations and all these restrictions on, you know, the way the society is. And so they just fix it up right away.
Right.
And so, you know, like, you know, we could debate about what would come first, but I think, you know,
that's a big
going
debate,
back
isn't
to
it?
God. Yeah.
That's a big debate. People tell me that. They say, David, I want the end of the big government intrusion you want, but we got to get our people moral first to be able to do it. And then some people say, well, no, the bad laws keep people in a state of immorality a little bit too. So it's like it's chicken or egg. Which comes first, right?
Right. I agree.
Well, hey, I mean, I really appreciate your time, Barouk, and it's been a pleasure getting to talk to you. Any kind of final thoughts or anything you'd like to wrap up with as we will close it out now and pick this up again, hopefully, if we can do that, Lord willing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I would just like to say that, you know, me from a Ethiopian perspective, looking through the culture and the politics from a mimetic theory lens, then, you know, it becomes this classic story of individual versus the crowd. And, you know, Ethiopia's, you know, reaching this kind of apocalyptic stage in its history where, you know, we either fight or we, you know, we have peace and we live together, you know. And so, you know, I'm gonna try to wake up my brothers and sisters here, try to, you know, have the, you know, the story of Jesus, try to, you know, so that the story of Jesus resonates, you know, with the people here and the culture, and so that, you know, we don't end up in a terrible situation. But yeah, I think it's always the individual versus the crowd, and I think that's the fight of the millennia, fight of the I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a big fight ahead of us, and there's a lot of work to do, not just in Ethiopia and America, all over the world. Christians have to stand up for what is right and be moral and upright people that fear God, and I think everything else just comes after that.
Yeah, we need to find a Girard fan who's a
So
Christian
yeah,
in
and thank
China.
you, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We got to find a Rene Girard fan in China who's a Christian who can give us their perspective of their situation, huh?
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah, for
cool.
sure.
All right,
Yeah.
very good. Thanks a lot, Barouk. It's a pleasure talking to you.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you, David.